Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly highly charged piece of source material. It claims there is a massive, systemic double standard in how trading laws are enforced right here in the US. We're going to objectively analyze these claims, breaking down the alleged discrepancies between how everyday citizens are treated versus our lawmakers. And then we'll look at the specific financial mechanics the source pitches to supposedly level that playing field. It's going to be a highly structured journey through these claims, so let's get right into it.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. First, a tale of two standards. Second, defining insider trading. Third, the Stock Act disclosures. And finally, strategies for retail investors.
Starting off with Section 1, a tale of two standards.
The source sets up this incredibly striking juxtaposition. On side A, you have a military member connected to a covert operation targeting Nicholas Maduro. He allegedly placed a bet tied to that operation, making about $400,000. Well, according to the source, the DOJ arrested him, and he's now facing literally 50 to 60 years in prison. Now contrast that with side B. The source argues that lawmakers routinely trade stocks with private access to information the public simply doesn't have, making massive returns, yet they face absolutely zero charges, investigations, or consequences. The original material presents this as just a glaring double standard of justice.
And the crucial point here is the sheer scale of the alleged returns, 17,000. The source claims that figures like Nancy Pelosi have seen returns as high as 17,000% on their stock investments. Now, it's really important to note that the host of the source material emphasizes this is not just a partisan issue. They state explicitly that this alleged corruption happens across the political spectrum. Both Democrats and Republicans are allegedly making a fortune off of what the source describes as private insider information.
So, according to the original material, there was actually a bipartisan push to implement a strict ban on congressional stock trading. But the source asserts that this ban was actively blocked. Specifically, it alleges that House Democrat leadership, led by Hakeem Jeffries, pressured members not to support it. The source uses this to argue that lawmakers are always going to prioritize their personal financial interests over fair market practices, essentially creating an exclusive private club that protects its own wealth while prosecuting outsiders.
Which brings us to Section 2, defining insider trading. To really understand the strategy they pitch later, we have to look at how the financial expert from the video, Ross Given, differentiates these concepts. Given defines illegal insider trading as using private, non-public information to profit. Think of a CEO or a member of Congress trading on unreleased legislation. But here's the catch. He argues that while lawmakers frequently do this, it's almost never prosecuted. Why? Because the justice system requires a literal smoking gun. To prove it, you need hard evidence, like a direct text message saying, "Hey, thanks for the tip, I'm buying this stock." Given points out that trying to prove a simple wink or a nod in a courtroom is pretty much impossible.
So that builds directly into the alternative strategy the source proposes. Given contrasts illegal insider trading with what he calls legal tracking. This is the practice of simply following and mirroring the publicly disclosed trades of politicians, CEOs, and corporate executives. Because this strategy entirely relies on pulling data from public federal websites where these trades are legally required to be reported, Given claims it's 100% above board. He even argues it's ethical, since our tax dollars are funding those lawmakers' salaries anyway.
Let's move right into Section 3, the Stock Act disclosures.
Now, what's really interesting here is the massive timeline disparity the source points out. The Stock Act was passed back in 2012, and the source claims it was basically spun to the public as a total ban on insider trading. But in reality, it just created reporting mandates. Check out these deadlines. Corporate executives, your CEOs and CFOs, they have to report their trades within 48 hours. But members of Congress, they somehow gave themselves up to 45 days to disclose those exact same types of trades. Listen to this quote from Ross Given. When you write the laws, you kind of set up some loopholes for yourself. That perfectly encapsulates the source's central argument about these disclosures. He points out that lawmakers operate under much more lenient reporting rules than corporate executives simply because they're the ones holding the pen. They mandate strict 48-hour turnarounds for the private sector, but miraculously build in a comfortable 45-day buffer for themselves.
All right, shifting to our final section, strategies for retail investors. So Ross Given lays out a surprisingly straightforward 4-step methodology for everyday Americans to use this data. Step 1, just access the free SEC online databases where all these disclosures live. Step 2, filter that data to look for what he calls outlier investments. Step 3, look for moments where multiple insiders are all piling into the exact same obscure stock at the exact same time. And Step 4, follow those trades and invest right alongside them.
Let's clarify what he actually means by an outlier investment, because it is the absolute core of this strategy. An outlier isn't just a politician buying standard tech giants like Apple or Nvidia. I mean, most people have those in their mutual funds anyway. Instead, imagine a senator who sits on a defense subcommittee, who almost never buys individual stocks, suddenly going heavy on a tiny, super obscure military contracting stock. That highly specific, totally unusual behavior, that's the strong market signal you're looking to track.
And this brilliantly illustrates the potential power of the strategy. 300%. The source points to a tiny pharmaceutical stock that was trading at just 40 cents a share. Right before the results of a drug trial were scheduled to be released, 11 corporate insiders at that very company, we're talking the CEO, the CFO, the chief medical officer, they all suddenly bought massive amounts of the stock. By tracking that public disclosure and buying in, the source claims their members saw the stock surge 300% in just a couple of months.
Let's look at how this plays out across a couple of distinct sectors highlighted in the video. In energy, the source argues that oil CEOs have true boots-on-the-ground knowledge. They predicted a crude inventory backlog would last 6 to 12 months, they bought heavily into the sector, and boom! Subsequently, companies like Exxon, Shell, and BP reported record profits. Over in the pharmaceutical sector, it's that 11 insider buy-in right before a major clinical trial result we just talked about. The core idea here is that these executives understand their industries way better than the average retail investor, and tracking them legally leverages that superior market knowledge.
So wrapping up the source material, the host and the financial expert actually pitch a live training event for viewers who want to put this tracking strategy into practice. They announce a free webinar scheduled for Wednesday, May 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern, hosted over at insidertradeswithbri.com. The stated goal of the event is to teach attendees exactly how to filter those SEC databases to find those outlier trades, and they're even offering free research on a recent insider pick just for registering.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. Based on everything from the source material we've unpacked today, ask yourself, is it genuinely ethical to track the trades of the very people who write the laws and regulate the markets? Or is utilizing these free public databases simply the only logical way for the everyday retail investor to level a deeply, deeply unequal playing field? It's a complex question about systemic mechanics and personal finance for sure. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the hard questions.